Okay.
I actually have another one here that says, "These are two really cool dudes.
Yeah.
They're so funny. Ha ha. They make me laugh every single morning."
One of them is kind of cute too. That's what
Really?
it says right there.
Oh yeah, it's the blonde one.
We're both blonde. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Average Joe Football Show. I'm your host, Joe Fair. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of Rob Lowe's favorite football podcast. Yeah. Rob Lowe.
I'm every single week I'm sitting here and I'm just like smiling, just like, what's he?
Literally smiling from ear to ear, waiting for me to say.
Smiling like Rob Lowe.
Like Rob Lowe. I'm joined, obviously, by my illustrious producer, Joe Teason. How's it going, Joe?
It's going as good as it could be.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah, no, I actually am a big fan of Rob Lowe.
Me too. I pretty much only know him well from Parks and Rec.
Okay.
And his character on there is just, I like how he's just positive.
Chris Traeger, yeah.
Yeah, Chris Traeger, just positive all the time. The reason I thought about him now, though, was because he's on this show.
That's always advertised when we watch football.
Always.
Yes.
It's like a firefighter show. I think it's called 911
Star 911 no.
Dallas something Texas. Yeah, well, it's like 911
I think it's called Houston we have
Lone
a problem.
Star. No, okay.
I was thinking Lone Star too.
Lone Star. And I'm pretty sure. I'm going to look it up, but I'm pretty sure it's called 911, not 911. 911 Lone Star. That's for sure what it is.
You think so?
Oh yeah, 100%. I'm feeling pretty good about that.
All right.
Yep, 911 Lone Star. Make sure you guys check it out every weekday.
NBC.
NBC. It probably is on NBC, actually. I'm not even sure.
Oh.
But I'm pretty sure, Rob Lowe, one of the first things that comes up when you search 911 Lone Star is 911 Lone Star canceled? Let's see. Nope, they got renewed. So we're going to be all right.
Nice.
Never watched it, but it looks pretty bad. Not going to lie.
Yeah, it didn't look great to me, but
yeah,
we also didn't watch it. You probably, sorry, it's kind of embarrassing, but you probably don't even know Rob Lowe from The Outsiders.
No, I don't even know what that is actually.
So The Outsiders was a book that I read
I've read The Outsiders.
Stay Gold Pony Boy.
No, okay, I haven't. I think that we had a bunch of choices to read, and Outsiders was one of them, but I read one called Maniac McGee.
Oh.
Yeah.
No, The Outsiders was an amazing book. I actually really enjoyed it. It's by S.E. Hinton. And
Really?
And they made a movie about it, and Rob Lowe played a character in the movie.
Really?
Yeah, he did. And it was, so he was shirtless in one scene. So.
Oh my goodness gracious.
Yeah.
This is a family show.
Yeah, sorry. But yeah, it's awesome.
On today's episode, we're actually just going to talk all about how much we love Rob Lowe, different aspects of Rob Lowe. I like that he's getting older, but he just, wow.
He looks great.
He's drop dead gorgeous.
I've actually watched interviews of him, and his personality is very similar to Chris Traeger.
That's why I love him.
Yeah, he's great.
Seems like such a happy, positive man.
Yeah.
And also there was last year during the playoffs, he was at a 49ers game, and he was in the crowd, and they cut to him, and he's wearing a hat that just has the NFL logo on it. And everybody made fun of him so hard for that.
Yeah.
But I remember for months before that, I was thinking, how cool would it be if I bought a hat that had just the NFL logo? I thought that was the coolest thing.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, okay, so this is how everybody would feel if I bought a hat with just the NFL logo
That's
on.
awesome, though.
Yeah.
He wasn't cheering for any teams. He was just going for the NFL. Yeah. He was there, and he was loving it.
Rooting for the corporation.
The incorporation.
The incorporation. He's in with the corporation.
Yes.
Thank you guys again for tuning in to another episode of the podcast. This is the Average Joe Football Show. For those of you guys that don't know, we are a couple of Joes, and sometimes a Joel.
We're up to no good. And started making
very good. Wow. Did you write that?
Very fast.
Did you write that?
Yeah.
Really?
So actually, this is episode 40.
40. This is episode 40. If you're only tuning in now, you might as well stop. Because honestly, if you haven't been along for the whole ride, just give up. You don't honestly deserve to be here.
Oh, yeah. That's not...
I'm just kidding.
Not true.
Recently, been feeling really excited about the podcast. I'm getting, encouraged.
We've been rolling in a lot of money.
Yeah, we are making, again, hand over fist with this podcast. No, but for real, you guys, for those of you that have been along for the whole ride, or you haven't been, or you've just recently found this podcast, really appreciate you guys tuning in. We've seen a little bit of growth lately, and it's been super encouraging. And if you guys do enjoy the show, feel free to hit us up on social medias. My wife gets very mad when I say social medias.
I do too.
Oh, you do?
Yeah,
You haven't brought it up.
It's incorrect.
Yeah.
Politically incorrect.
It's politically incorrect. It's offensive, actually.
Yeah. How dare you?
Hit us up on social media. I appreciate, people give me feedback. It doesn't happen all that often, but when it does, even if it's, constructive criticism, that's cool. I really enjoy hearing back from listeners of the show, like, hey, I really like it when you do this, or why don't you do more of this, or whatever. I really appreciate that. So if you, big shout out to everybody that listens to the podcast. Appreciate you so much, and I hope you appreciate being appreciated. And speaking of appreciation, we still have a thing going on. If you give us a 5-star rating / review on Apple Podcasts, we will say whatever you say in your little review. So this is how it goes. You go onto Apple Podcasts. Joe, explain to them what they got to do to be on the podcast.
Here's what you got to do. You're going to open your Apple Podcast app,
It's
which
so
I'm
easy.
doing currently.
So easy.
You go and you search Average Joe Football Show if it's not already in your library.
You should already be subscribed at this point. If you're
Yeah.
listening to this, you should make sure you do that first. Hit subscribe.
Yes. And then you click on the show. Right at the top, actually, you can rate it, I think. Actually, you have to click the 3 dots that are in the top right corner.
You do? I didn't even know that was a thing.
Nope, sorry, you don't.
Okay. All right, how about I take it
You go
from
to
here?
sorry, you just sorry.
You fine?
You just scroll down.
You good? Okay.
Yeah.
You want me to take over?
No,
Okay.
I'm actually good. Yeah.
All right. You sure?
Thanks, Joe. I'm gonna take it from here, and then you go scroll down, and then you can see the ratings and reviews. So far, we have 12 ratings, all 5 stars.
Listen, if you give us 5 stars, we will literally find you and we will kill you. I swear to goodness. If you drop our rating, please give us a 5-star rating. I cannot stress enough how much, please, you need to give us a 5-star rating. If you're listening to this podcast and you don't give us a 5-star rating, again, why are you even here?
Yeah.
First of all, if you haven't been here since the beginning, if you haven't, given us a 5-star rating, what's the point? You obviously don't care about us. Why are you even here? Right, Joe?
Reverse psychology.
Yeah, reverse psychology.
Wink, wink.
Right?
Yeah. So, for instance, here's one that we got. It says, "This show is so easy to listen to. It's one of the best podcasts I've listened to in regards to the banter back and forth. Obviously, these guys have a lot of good chemistry, and I can't stop laughing. They're hilarious, and they only get better with each episode." We got another one here that actually says,
Please stop.
This
is literally just us just looking in the mirror and tell this, wow.
No, this is actually from my wife.
I know it. Okay.
They actually have another one here that says, "These are 2 really cool dudes.
Yeah.
They're so funny. Ha ha. They make me laugh every single morning."
One of them is kind of cute, too. That's what it says right there.
Oh, yeah. It's the blonde one.
We're both blonde. Oh, man. This is so lame. But this is a show where we talk football eventually at some point. But basically, if this is the first time you're listening, this is a show. It's me, Joe Fair. And I'm obviously joined by my producer, Joe Thiessen. Like I said earlier, I know, a decent amount about football, enough to where I wanted to start a podcast about football. Joe knows enough to where he could be the producer of my football podcast. Joe, you're good at a lot of things. In football's not maybe one of those things. I don't want to, discourage you. You
don't want to discourage me.
This weekend, you were on the ball.
Really?
I watched a lot of football.
That's right.
This weekend.
Yeah.
It was super Wildcard weekend this weekend.
Wow.
And Joe, you were engaged. You even named some players.
Yeah, dude. And I'm telling you, if Sims would have just caught that ball, if Wims just would have caught that ball.
Oh, wait, listen, we'll get into that. Into that.
Man.
Javon Wims. You also named another player.
Stevan Williams.
Stevan. I was going to say David Montgomery. You hit that. But I think it's because it showed his name on the screen.
Maybe. I don't know.
It's too soon to
Not
tell.
relevant, but.
But yeah, we had a crazy wildcard weekend. Some would argue maybe too many games. This was the first year that the extra playoff team, so there was 1 or 2 extra games in wildcard weekend. Holy smokes, it was a loaded weekend of football. And some games were fantastic. Some games, I'm not going to lie, were sleepers. They were hard to get through. And we'll talk all the games that happened. We'll talk the games that are happening next week. But before we do that, why don't we just jump into, Joe, unless you have something. I just also want to say that Rob Lowe's show, Lone Star, only has a 3-star rating. So
is there a Rotten Tomatoes on that?
No, I was just looking on Google. So let's maybe give Rob Lowe 5 stars as well, and tell him that we sent you.
Yeah,
actually, who cares about rating our podcast? Just go and rate Rob Lowe.
Please help out Rob Lowe. He needs it.
He needs help. Honestly,
apparently he needs it more than we do.
Yeah, we'll be fine. We'll be okay. But Joe, unless you have anything else you want to say, why don't we just jump straight into a little bit of news? First up in the news, we're talking NFL news, and there was actually quite a bit. It almost makes me miss Joel and wish that he was on the podcast this week. Joel's just such a busy man now with everything going on that he can't make it on the podcast this week. But hopefully he'll be on again at some point. But the first piece of news, the reason that it would have been nice to have Joel on the podcast this week is because Doug Peterson, who we talked at length last week, Joel and I. If you have not checked out that podcast, make sure you go do it. It was a good one. But this week, Doug Peterson, the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles, was given his walking papers. He no longer has a job. He's the newest coach to be fired. We've yet to have any head coach hirings, a bunch of interviews going on, but Doug Peterson gets his walking papers. This is just 3 years removed from winning a Super Bowl. So it's kind of crazy to think that he's literally 3 years. Imagine you're at your job and you do the best thing you can possibly do at your job. You've done it. That's the best thing you can do. And then 3 years later, you don't even have that job anymore. It's like, how bad?
Well,
what?
You can mess up really quick.
Well, yes, but that's true.
Very fast.
Yeah, okay.
You can have a couple bad weeks and then you're out, you know?
A couple really bad weeks.
Yeah.
And you could argue that Doug Peterson had a couple really bad weeks. He finishes his tenure in Philadelphia, a 5-year tenure with a 42-37-1 record. So a winning record, 4-2 in the playoffs. Since his Super Bowl victory, however, a 22-25-1 record. I think this had a lot to do with his relationship with Carson Wentz. It also seems like Doug Peterson did not want to be there for a rebuild. It seemed like he wanted to win now. I saw reports out by, I think, Ian Rappaport, that Doug Peterson also didn't like being told what to do. Which, you could argue that nobody in the whole world likes to be told what to do. Doug, I'm not sure where you're going to find a job as a coach where nobody's telling you what to do, because you were literally a head coach, the highest coach you can possibly be, unless you want to buy a team, which you don't have the money for. I don't know when you're possibly going to not be told what to do, but there are rumors swirling about him potentially going to the Jets. He has a good relationship with Joe Douglas, the GM there in New York, so that's an interesting thing, to keep an eye on. I don't know if that's going to get Jets fans excited at all, if Jets fans ever get excited anymore. But yeah, the Eagles let go of Doug Peterson. Interested to see who they bring in and who they stick with. If they stick with Carson Wentz with a new head coach, or maybe they go back to Jalen Hurts. It's definitely an interesting. We have a whole offseason to talk about that, but definitely an interesting scenario. And then speaking of coaching hires, we had a couple of former head coaches getting hired as defensive coordinators. First, we had the Cowboys hiring Dan Quinn, the former coach of the Atlanta Falcons, to be their new defensive coordinator. They had an opening there. Their defense was a absolute dumpster fire at times last year. They hire the former Atlanta Falcons head coach, who was a pretty good defensive coordinator in Seattle before getting hired in Atlanta. His defense is surprisingly, despite being a defensive-minded coach, the offense was the best part of those teams. He finishes with a 43-42 record in 6 years in Atlanta, and just was never the same after that Super Bowl loss. the most disastrous loss you could possibly imagine. And then another former head coach, this has been a while, but Gus Bradley also getting hired by John Gruden and the Las Vegas Raiders. He was the defensive coordinator in Los Angeles, and now he's going to join the Las Vegas Raiders to be a defensive coordinator. And then we have the real big news. This is the real big news before we get into all the playoff stuff. This is, other than the playoff games, this was the biggest talking point throughout this whole weekend and throughout this whole last week in the NFL. And it was Deshaun Watson, the young elite level quarterback, the guy who led the league in passing yards on a 4-12 team. Deshaun Watson seems to be unhappy in Houston. He seems to be unhappy. There were reports coming out late last week that Deshaun Watson was unhappy with the direction the Houston Texans were going, and that he was potentially talking to teammates about demanding a trade. And then all of a sudden, all the fans of every team starts photoshopping Deshaun Watson into their team's uniforms, as they do, as you should. And then early Sunday, Chris Mortensen of ESPN, a trusted source for a lot of people, comes out and says he has sources telling him that Deshaun Watson is in fact unhappy in Houston. He's unhappy with the direction that they've gone. He's unhappy because they told him that he would have say in the general manager hire. They told him that he would have say in the head coaching hire, and then he suggested they bring in Eric Bieniemy as the head coach, and they didn't even interview him. So Deshaun Watson was unhappy about that, and then Chris Mortensen also saying Deshaun Watson potentially would be open to a trade involving him going to Miami to play for the Dolphins and Tua Tagovailoa going to Houston. So that happened. And I'm sure the Dolphins are super psyched about being thrown into this story when they already have a quarterback that's been through quite a lot in his rookie season. So that was kind of the biggest story happening this week is Deshaun Watson. And I think it's going to be a huge offseason storyline. The Texans are now apparently bringing in Eric Bieniemy. They've requested to bring him in for an interview. It seems kind of like covering their butt at this point. Because they cannot bring him in an interview until he's done in the playoffs, which could be until February, because the Chiefs have a very good chance to go to the Super Bowl. So it seems as though Deshaun Watson, I don't know, there's something in the air, and people think it's ridiculous to say that Deshaun Watson, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, is going to get traded, because that just doesn't happen with quarterbacks. People think it's crazy, but I don't know. Most trades before they happen, big time trades, seem crazy, and to me, there's something in the air that feels like this is going to happen, that he's going to be on a different team. I think it's a stupid idea for the Houston Texans. I don't know why on God's green earth you have a top 5 potential quarterback, a franchise-changing quarterback, and you would not cater everything to him. I mean, you obviously don't want to, cross that line and have him running the franchise, but you got to find ways to make him happy, because it's so hard to come by a quarterback. And as far as the Dolphins things go, obviously I'm a Dolphins fan, and I talked a lot about Tua, how I still believe in him last week, and how I think the Dolphins should still continue to work with him and not give up on him. And all that being said, all that is completely still true. That all rings true. I still all believe all that. However, if this Deshaun Watson thing is real and you have a genuine chance to go and get Deshaun Watson, and all you have to give up is a couple of first-round picks and Tua, I don't know how you can't do that. I mean, that is an incredible opportunity because I still think Tua is going to be great. I still think he has the ability to be a great quarterback, but you can bring in a already developed, amazing elite talent in Deshaun Watson, a franchise-changing player who's ready to go right now, and I think that immediately makes Miami a Super Bowl contender. Honestly, especially if they make other improvements this offseason. And I'm not saying that this is going to happen. Odds are it won't happen. But if you have the opportunity and for the right price, where you don't cripple your franchise, I mean, you have Houston Texans' first 2 picks. You can just give them back to the Houston Texans. But if you have the opportunity to get Deshaun Watson, as much as I love Tua and as much as I believe in Tua in the future, I don't know how you can't take that. But as far as other scenarios that Deshaun Watson could potentially go in, I like the idea of him potentially going to San Francisco. Obviously, I would love to have him in Miami. And I think it's a win-win scenario right now for Miami. You either get a young, developing quarterback that you can surround with a ton of draft picks and a ton of good players this offseason with all the cap space that you have, or you can get Deshaun freaking Watson. But a team that I would love to see Deshaun Watson, I could actually see it happening. I could see him going to the San Francisco 49ers. And to me, this would make the San Francisco 49ers probably one of the best teams in the NFL. We saw what they did last year with Jimmy Garoppolo. They went all the way to the Super Bowl. And I think if you add Deshaun Watson to a Kyle Shanahan offense, and there's better weapons there in San Francisco. They have pieces to trade. They may not have like high picks, but they have defensive pieces. They can just say, hey, Houston, take one of our stud defensive players for a franchise-altering quarterback. So I would love to see Deshaun Watson potentially be in San Francisco. And again, this is something that we will discuss week in and week out. I just wanted to touch on it a little bit as it was just such a huge story this week. And Deshaun Watson is going to be a polarizing figure throughout this whole offseason. So make sure you guys stay tuned. It's going to be an exciting offseason, but we're going to just jump into the playoff games. But before we do that, we're going to do a little thing that we haven't done. It's been probably a couple months already. It's a little game we play on this podcast. I'm going to bring back in my illustrious producer for everybody's favorite podcast game show. Say it with me, folks. What does Joe know? All right.
I don't know if you wanted me to say it with you or what.
No, well, it would have helped.
You said
for
folks,
sure,
but I just
kind
of panicked.
It's fine. Some people don't consider themselves a folk.
No, that's fine.
But Joe, I talked about how we were watching a little bit of football together this weekend.
Yeah,
as well as with our friend Joel.
Don't even ask me what games were played.
Okay, no. Well, we're gonna ask you, something along the lines. But I noticed that you were engaged. You really seem to be, saying things at the right times. Even if you were maybe mimicking me, trying to fit in. You did a good job.
Trying to fit in.
You did a good job.
So bad.
We watched our boy Bisky play on Nickelodeon a little bit. We didn't actually watch him on Nickelodeon. We couldn't get that channel, but that was the sleepiest game. And if you were involved in that sleepy game, you must really be, getting better at this. I think you really know what you're talking about.
Thanks. Sorry. Let me take that again.
He's so nervous.
Go again.
Excuse me?
Let's take that again.
No, we're just gonna run with that actually.
Thanks.
No, yeah. Okay. Yeah, you gonna cut that in post?
Yeah.
Anyways, just totally messed up my flow, man. I'm just kidding. Today, Joe, before we get into the actual question, how many teams are left in the NFL playoffs? Let's focus here a little bit. So,
okay.
Each conference going into the playoffs. This is the start of the playoffs. We just had playoffs this week. Each conference has 7 teams.
Okay.
Going into the playoffs.
Okay.
That's all I'm going to say. How many teams do you think there is left? So 7 plus 7. 7 plus 7 is
14.
Okay, perfect. And there was 6 games this weekend.
Okay.
So
there's 12 teams left. So let's take that again. I don't understand anything about conferences.
No, that doesn't matter. Okay, there was 6 games this week, so that means 6 teams had to be eliminated.
Okay. We have to start from square one.
No, we don't.
I think we do.
There's 8 teams left. Okay, there's
8
teams left. Obviously.
Jeez, why didn't you say it from the beginning?
Because I was asking you. Okay, I have 9 teams written down right now here on this piece of paper, Joe. I have 8 of them are the 8 teams left in the dance. They're left. They can still win the Super Bowl. One of them, however, was eliminated this weekend. They were in the playoffs this weekend. They are no longer a part of the playoffs, Joe. All you have to do is in 9 names, you have to tell me which one of these teams is no longer a part of the NFL playoffs. All right? Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So here's your teams. You can write them down if you want or not. I don't really care. But team number 1 here. And let's make sure to pace ourselves, okay?
Okay.
There's nine teams written down here.
All right.
The Cleveland Browns
Okay.
is number 1.
All right. Yeah, they are number 1. They did great this weekend.
Very good.
Kick butt.
Number 2, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Alrighty.
Okay. Number 3, the Seattle Seahawks.
Okay.
Okay. Number 4, the New Orleans Saints.
Okay.
Number 5, the Kansas City Chiefs.
Okay.
Number 6, the Los Angeles Rams.
All right.
7, Green Bay Packers. 8, Baltimore Ravens. That's your team. Baltimore Ravens.
That's my team, and they're going on.
9,
Lamar Jackson's looking scary right now.
looking skinny. Yes. 9, the Buffalo Bills. So through the first run through, is there any names that stick out to you?
Yeah, I have my final answer.
You really? You don't
Yeah.
even need me to go through it one more time?
No.
Really? Holy smokes.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh wow. Okay. We still have like
Wait, no.
4 minutes of time here. I'm just kidding. There's no time for this. So you're pretty confident.
Yeah, I think so. Can you just say it one more time?
Yeah, I'll
though?
quickly run through the 9 teams.
Just
So
actually say it quickly this time.
all right, yeah.
When you say it slow, by the time you say one name to the other, I've already forgotten the first one.
Okay. Here we go. Cleveland Browns,
Okay.
Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Seattle Seahawks, the New Orleans Saints, the Kansas City Chiefs, the Los Angeles Rams, the Green Bay Packers, the Baltimore Ravens, and the Buffalo Bills. Which one of these teams is no longer a part of the final Elite 8, if you please, in the NFL? Drum roll, please. I'm going to make you edit that drum roll in post. Hit the drum roll.
I can do whatever I want.
Okay,
Post,
that's actually fair. You have a final answer?
Final answer. What is Seattle Seahawks?
What is Seattle Seahawks? How are you feeling about that answer?
Not good.
Really?
Yeah.
Like, what? Like, okay, obviously you feel good enough to make it your answer.
Yeah.
And obviously you're 100% correct.
Yes, I knew it.
Incredible.
I knew it.
Wow.
I knew it.
You impress me
Did
every week.
Did they get beat by the Bills?
No. Oh,
Okay.
shoot. We have to stop after you answer.
No, listen, stop. It doesn't matter. It's fine. It doesn't matter.
We always have to stop after you get the answer right because you often dig yourself a hole after.
Yeah. No, they played the Packers.
No. Okay.
So they played the Ravens.
No.
They played.
I feel like we should just move on. They played the Los Angeles Rams.
Yeah, I knew it.
Okay. All right. Well, congratulations, Joe.
Okay.
All right. You did
Thank
it.
you.
I'm happy
Thank
for
you
you.
very much.
Despite you always ruining the momentum of you getting the question right.
I hate
You did it.
myself.
You won again. You do know. What does Joe know? He does.
What does Joe know? Yes.
The answer is yes. He does. But why don't we just move on to the next segment? We're going to go through every game from this week.
And there's only 8 now.
Only 6.
There's only 6 games.
6 games.
So
How awesome is that?
We're going to be done in, I think, 7 minutes.
Literally 7 minutes. I think that's literally what I have written down. 7 minutes.
Wow.
Wow. So here we go. Why
That's
don't we
ridiculous.
just jump into the games? The first game of the Wildcard weekend, and probably the best game. We talked about how some of the games, and we'll get into some of those games, were complete sleepers, bad games. And in the first thing that you think of when you think, okay, we added another Wildcard team. So that's probably why some of the games are bad, is because we have some of these 7 seeds really stinking it up. But that was not really the case, in every scenario, because in this game, the Buffalo Bills versus the Indianapolis Colts, we had a 7 seed Indianapolis Colts playing really good football. This was the best game of the week. I'll be honest. It only gets bad from here, but I'm just kidding. Please stick around. We're going to talk more football, but this was definitely the best game of the week, and it started Wild Card weekend off with a bang. It reminded me very much of last year when we had the Buffalo Bills playing against the Houston Texans in the first game. And that game also started Wildcard weekend off with a bang. But I dismiss the Colts completely going into this game. And it was not because I hate the Colts or not because I wanted to dismiss them, but I thought that the Buffalo Bills were playing otherworldly going into this playoffs, and I still believe that. It was maybe not their best game against Indy, but I still think they are incredible. And the stuff that they've done this season, it just led me to believe that there was no chance that they were gonna lose in Wild Card weekend. But Indianapolis, I give them credit, and they did not win. Obviously, you probably know that if you're listening to a football podcast at this point. But Indianapolis falls 24-27. But I give them a tremendous amount of credit. They made this game fun. They made this game entertaining, and they fought to the bitter end. And honestly, going into halftime, Indianapolis played the better game. And the way this game started, it looked like from the beginning, Jonathan Taylor was going to have a big game. I think that the Buffalo Bills, one of their biggest weaknesses is probably their run defense. And I said to Joel, we were texting during this game, I said, I think Jonathan Taylor is going to have a big game today. And it seemed like that from the beginning. He ended up, doing all right. He had 21 carries, 78 yards, and a touchdown. And he had some really key drops in this game. I felt like 2 or 3 times he had really key drops that hurt. And I think that hurt Indianapolis a lot in this game. And like I said, they got off to a really hot start. They were marching down the field and putting the Buffalo Bills in terrible field position. The punting game was huge for Indianapolis in this game. They constantly had really good starting field position, and they constantly had Buffalo starting in terrible field position. They got off to a hot start. They dominated the first half. Honestly, Buffalo did not come out looking good, and I thought that this game was really all about Josh Allen completely putting this team on his back in Buffalo, because Indy played their best game. Honestly, with what they're given, and that's Phillip Rivers, who, I mean, that guy, all the respect in the world, Phillip Rivers. I like him as a person, and it's a shame that his career might be over now. He was throwing ducks this whole game, and I say that again, utmost respect. He was throwing ducks. It seemed like every pass that he threw just floated to the receiver. I mean, he was throwing ducks, and somehow they kept marching the ball down the field. Indianapolis kept getting in these situations to score. And the biggest thing that affected Indianapolis this week and ended their season was missed opportunities. They could not punch the ball in. They could not get touchdowns despite moving the ball really, really well against what is a decent Buffalo Bills defense. They were 2 for 5 getting touchdowns in the red zone, two touchdowns and 5 trips. They had a missed field goal. They had a ton of drop passes. It felt like there was a ton of drop passes. And like I said, Phillip Rivers, he was either throwing an absolute dime or he couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. And then I thought the part of the game that really changed the game for Indianapolis and in Buffalo's favor was the end of the second quarter. Going into halftime, Indianapolis is driving, and it's within 2 minutes. They have first and goal at the Buffalo 4. And they have a 2-yard pass on first down. They have a 1-yard run. And then they have a negative 3-yard run on a pitch to Jonathan Taylor, which I don't understand. You had the ball at the 1-yard line and you pitched it to Jonathan Taylor, who is a power rusher. That guy runs angry. Why not? I would have said all 3 downs. Why not try to get it to Jonathan Taylor against a poor run defense? But they had that negative 3-yard run. And then Phillip Rivers overthrows his receiver there in the end zone. I'm blanking on the receiver's name right now, but he overthrows the receiver in the back of the end zone, and they don't convert there going into halftime. And then Buffalo proceeds to go down the field and score a touchdown before halftime, giving them the lead, giving them all the momentum, and they were helped out by a huge boneheaded offsides play that was just one of the worst offsides you'll see. I mean, Buffalo was lining up on 4th down, just on the edge of field goal range, if not out of field goal range, before the second half, and the play clock is already basically at 0. Josh Allen, anybody and their sister can tell that Josh Allen is doing a hard count. He's trying to get the defense offsides, and he gets Indianapolis to jump offsides, and that was devastating. That completely changed the game. He then throws a touchdown to Stephon Diggs, and that basically is a wrap. And I thought the keys to this game for Buffalo was Josh Allen played out of his mind. What a difference it's been from last year, where he was, costing them a playoff game, to now being the reason that they're winning a playoff game. Josh Allen, his ability to make plays out of nothing in this game and literally put the team on his back was the key to their victory. And I thought the key to the Indianapolis Colts losing this game was just missed opportunities. They played their best game. They came and played their best game. Their defense played well, about as well as you can play against this explosive offense. And they had opportunities. If they would have scored on more opportunities, they would have upset the Buffalo Bills. And we would be talking about them playing the Kansas City Chiefs next week. But the Bills are a hard team to contain for too long. And a slow start can evaporate in a hurry if you don't take advantage of opportunities. We see this week in and week out with teams playing the Bills. If you can contain them early on, you have to take advantage of opportunities. And Indianapolis could not do that. So congratulations. Buffalo gets their very first playoff win in 25 years. Big time win for Bills and Bills fans. On to the next game, and we get right into the sleepy part of Wildcard Weekend. This was a game that was hard to get through at times. This game felt like it was 7 hours long, Joe. For those of you that don't understand why I'm laughing, Joe is eating a banana while I'm doing this, and it's making me very uncomfortable. You stop. You don't need to look at me when you're doing it, okay? I'm also trying to understand why you had to eat a banana right now, during the podcast.
I was hungry, man.
Okay. I haven't even eaten supper yet. Dinner, whatever you want to call it.
You want a bite?
No, I'm very much okay.
All right, thanks.
Okay. Yeah, okay. And speaking of weird things, this game between the Rams and the Seahawks was a weird one. John Wolford, it was kept a secret this whole week by Sean McVay, who would start at quarterback. And John Wolford got the call and immediately hit by Jamal Adams and out of the game immediately. So Jared Goff comes in with I think 3 screws in his throwing thumb. Brutal. Literally last week he had surgery on his throwing thumb, and now he's going out there and trying to throw passes in an NFL game. And the Rams did walk away with the first upset of the weekend. And I think really the only upset. Oh, no, sorry. There was one more huge upset. But the Rams walk away with a 30-20 victory. And this was a tough game to watch, a tough game to digest. Bad quarterback play, and I don't know if it's even good defense. I think the Rams defense is really good. But there was also a lot of really poor offense played in this game. Russell Wilson, what a disappointing ending to this season. He went from, the first 3 weeks of the season, everybody's like, this is it. Russell Wilson's MVP. What a season. He's finally going to get an MVP vote, to the Seahawks going out with a complete whimper. This was an embarrassing loss to lose to a team that had their backup quarterback starting, and then your backup quarterback goes out. So Jared Goff comes in. He barely has a hand to throw with. And he really pretty much outperforms Russell Wilson, who was under constant pressure all day. He was sacked 5 times in this game, and he could not get anything done. But the Rams defense just really made life tough on him. And that was the key, I think, to this game for the Rams. Dominating defense. Aaron Donald had 2 sacks before getting injured. It looks like he'll be ready to play next week. He did suffer a rib injury in this game, but he was dominant for us. Darius Williams had the 3rd pick of Russell Wilson that he's had this season. He had a pick 6 on a screen pass, which basically shows you how this game went for the Seattle Seahawks. He picked off a wide receiver screen and took it to the house, and that completely turned the game around and in the Rams' favor. And I think the combination for the Rams, and this will be the key to success, I think, for this Rams team. They don't have the offense that they had a couple years ago when they were in the Super Bowl. But the key to their success in the future and against Green Bay this upcoming week is going to be a stout run offense like they had this week. Cam Akers had a huge game, 131 yards on the ground and a touchdown, 45 yards through the air. Seattle could not stop Cam Akers on the ground, despite knowing that they're going to just hand it to him every time. They couldn't stop Cam Akers. But it's going to be that combined with dominating defense. And that is the key to success, I think, for the Rams. And Seahawks, they have a lot of work to do this offseason, whether that's fixing their offensive line, getting Russell Wilson more playmakers, maybe getting a new offensive coordinator, something. I think it was probably the most disappointing way for Seattle to go out, and I can't imagine Seahawks fans how they're feeling. Not only to lose, but to lose in such a boring and uninspiring way. But yeah, that's kind of defines this game. A little boring, a little uninspiring. And then we move on to the final game of Saturday. Saturday. The final game of Saturday? Or what were you pumping your fist for?
I just saw that Rye X is putting out a live album.
Okay.
This Friday he's putting out a live album on in a concert hall with a bunch of his I think it's the mic.
Okay. So
this is not
going in the podcast?
It might.
Okay. Anyways, the night game there on Saturday was the Buccaneers at the Washington football team, and this seemed like a guaranteed win for a dominating Buccaneers team. But Taylor Heineke, who started this game over Alex Smith, had different idea going into this game. He was electric in this game. Buccaneers obviously walked away with a 31-23 victory, and they do move on to play New Orleans next week. But the huge story coming out of this game, other than Tom Brady being the oldest quarterback now to throw a touchdown pass in the playoffs. So congratulations to Tom Brady. He literally will never age. But Taylor Heineke, wow. I mean, this guy is electric. He was electric in this game. Nobody thought anything of him going into this game, and we thought, oh, here's going to be a snoozer. And this game was entertaining. I mean, he came in throwing dimes. I mean, he was throwing dimes. I mean, he looked like a legitimate quarterback. There are starting quarterbacks that I thought looked a lot worse this season than Taylor Heineke looked like in the playoffs. He ended up throwing for 306 yards, a touchdown interception, had 46 yards on the ground, and an incredible rushing touchdown where he just looked incredibly fast and athletic, diving for the pylon. And he even was injured at one point, and he comes back and attempts to lead them to a game-winning drive. And he couldn't get the job done, but shout out to Taylor Heineke for making Wildcard weekend a little bit more interesting. But the Buccaneers, they just handled business. It wasn't pretty at times, but at times it was. They got a lot of contributions from everybody on their team. All the guys you want to see contributing. Leonard Fournette finally had a big game, 93 yards on the ground. Tom Brady threw for 381 yards, 2 touchdowns. Mike Evans had over 100 yards. Chris Godwin had 79 yards and a touchdown. Antonio Brown pitched in with a touchdown. Cameron Brate had himself a big game. So these are encouraging signs, and they certainly did not play a bad defense. I think Washington has a really good defense. So encouraging signs going into next week. And just an overall fun, weird game. And then we move on to the Sunday games and start things off with what's become a rivalry in the AFC, and that's not a division rival, but it's two teams that met up during the regular season. They met up during last year's postseason, and that's the Ravens and the Titans. And going into this game, a lot of tension and a lot of storylines. Obviously, everybody's talking about the fact that Lamar Jackson has never won a playoff game, and the Titans seem to have the Ravens number. They beat them in the regular season. They beat them in the postseason. Derrick Henry just is going to dominate this Ravens team. And this game played out a lot differently than I think a lot of people expected. The Ravens walk away with a 20-13 victory over the Tennessee Titans. Lamar Jackson finally picks up And we say finally, it's only his third postseason. So let's maybe relax with that a little bit. But he does pick up his first postseason win. And this was probably one that felt pretty good against a team that exercised some demons, I think. Lamar Jackson was crazy in this game. I mean, he was tremendous. He had 179 yards through the air, 136 on the ground, and a touchdown. Marquise Hollywood-Brown played well. And the big storyline coming out of this game was Derrick Henry being completely shut down by this Ravens defense. The Titans get off to a hot start. They have a 10-0 lead. And another storyline that followed the Ravens all through last year, all into this year, the Ravens had never come back from down 10-0 with Lamar Jackson. And they do that in this game because Derrick Henry could not eat this game away. He could not eat out the clock because he ends with 18 rushes for 40 yards. That's 2.2 yards a carry. Completely shut down. They stacked the box the entire game against Derrick Henry. And that was surprising. That's one of the most surprising things I've seen this weekend was how well this defense completely stopped Derrick Henry and this Titans offense. Ryan Tannehill had a chance to win it there with a game-winning drive at the end. He throws an interception to Marcus Peters. And the Ravens, they love being the bad guys. They love playing the villains. They go and stomp on the Tennessee Titans logo. After Tennessee did it to their logo earlier in the season, you can just tell they love being the bad guys. They love being cocky. They love being loud. And I think that's going to make a lot of people not like them. I was not really rooting for them in this game. I was rooting for the Titans despite picking the Ravens. But a big-time win, Lamar Jackson. And I think very few teams want to see the Baltimore Ravens right now. I think they're getting hot at the right time. And that combination of that run game and that stout defense is going to be tough for a lot of teams going into this week. And then on to the next game. And this is one that we're going to try to run through a little bit quicker because it's maybe not the most entertaining.
Have you only gone through 2 games now?
No, that was 4 now.
Oh, nice.
Where have you been? This is game number 5, and it was the afternoon game on Sunday, Joe. And this was what teams here? It was the Nickelodeon game.
Oh, it was the Bears versus the. Is that right though? Bears.
Yeah, you got
so
the Bears
far?
right. That's good. Very good.
Bears versus the Saints.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very good. You know what cities they're from? No, I shouldn't push it. No, you're
Chicago Bears and the New Orleans Saints.
The New Orleans. Very good. That's awesome.
It?
Yeah, you killed it. That's awesome. Very good, Joe. It's almost it's kind of condescending when I do stuff like that.
It is.
I'm sorry.
Aren't the Saints the ones that have when the Saints go?
Anyway, so this game, sort of a boring game. 21-9. The Saints end up handling their business. It was ugly at times, and this was the sleepiest of games. It's really a bummer. This game was the first ever NFL game to be broadcast on Nickelodeon, of all places. And those poor kids, this is the game that they were exposed to. This game was tough. We were having conversations during this time, and I'm glad we had that because it would have been tough to sit through this entire game. And it was. The Chicago Bears got off to a pretty good start. And I think the whole game really turned around when Chicago, they dialed up a beautiful trick play. Trubisky, I think, pitches it back to a receiver. The receiver gets it back to Trubisky, so he can now throw a four-yard pass. Hits an absolute dime to Joe. Wims. Javon Wims. Javon freaking Wims drops the pass in the end, and it's the most perfect throw you'll ever see by our boy Biskey. And Javon Wims drops it, and from there on, Chicago didn't have much of a chance. I think that was it for them. The Saints just handled business. Who knows? Biskey, who knows what his future is? I don't know if he's coming back to Chicago. Hopefully, maybe we can get him on the podcast. He can just be a 3rd/4th guy on this podcast. Biskey and the boy. We'll even check. We've even discussed this before, haven't we?
If Mitch Trubisky would join our if Mitch Trubisky would sign a contract to do 10 episodes a year, okay, I would change the entire name of the podcast.
Oh, absolutely. 10 episodes a year?
Yes.
That's fairly good. we recorded what? Like 50 some episodes in a year.
Yes.
That's 1/5.
Yes.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, I'd
20%.
say. So, yeah.
Absolutely. We will completely change. Mitcher, listen to us. That game was so boring. Just come do a podcast, man. Football's fine. You can go back to that at any time, really. You never get too old to play football, but your prime podcast years are passing you by, man. But real quick, before we close the book on Mitch Trubisky and on the Chicago Bears, I do got to congratulate our boy Bisky, because there was fan voting in this game for the Nickelodeon MVP of the game, and none other than our boy, the boy, Mitch Trubisky. Congratulations. You know, people are going to talk about MVP. People are going to talk about All-Pro, Pro Bowl.
People might even talk about the Heisman.
The Heisman.
But
exactly. You guys missed it, Joe, doing the Heisman pose when he said that. That was glorious. But what we're going to talk about on this episode, on this podcast, the Bisky and the Boys podcast, is the Nickelodeon MVP. I think they call it the NVP. So congratulations to our MVP. Number one on the field, number one in our hearts, Mitch Trubisky. Rest in peace, sweet prince. We will see you again next season, and maybe on the podcast. And sorry, Saints, I didn't really talk about you, but I don't know. There's not much to say. Congratulations, you beat the Bears. And then moving on to the final game from Wildcard weekend, and boy, oh boy, was this a crazy game. The Cleveland Browns versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. In a rematch from Week 17, and the Browns come out. Why don't we start things off this week? You know, and this always seems to happen with the Pittsburgh Steelers every freaking year. I don't know what it is about Pittsburgh. The fact that they haven't won a Super Bowl since freaking 2008, and they have these delusions of grandeur. And this might come back to a coaching thing, because this team every year. And we saw it a couple years ago when they played Jacksonville. They get all cocky, all confident, start talking all this junk. And Juju Smith-Schuster all season long has been dancing, doing TikToks on people's logos. They're doing TikToks when they beat teams in the locker room, getting all cocky. And Juju Smith-Schuster comes out this week and says, "Oh, the Browns, they're just the same old Browns. We're not worried about them. The Browns is the Browns," is what he says. And that line would go down in infamy for Juju Smith-Schuster this week, because the Browns, they isn't the Browns anymore. He called them a bunch of nameless gray faces. I don't even know what that means, but those gray faces stomped in the faces of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And this game was I can't even describe to you what was happening at the beginning of this game. So the very first snap of the game, Marquise Pouncey, the other Pouncey brother, who I believe has actually announced his retirement since this game, snaps the ball over the head of the quarterback that he's been playing 9 years with. He snaps it completely over his head, and then James Conner and Ben Roethlisberger run like scared little school children back to get the ball. Somehow, they don't recover the ball. The Cleveland Browns recover the ball. Touchdown right off the bat. And wow, what a disastrous start for Pittsburgh. And it only got worse from there. The first snap is a touchdown for Cleveland. On the next drive, interception. Next drive after that, punt. And then another interception. So after the first quarter, the Browns is the Browns, are leading the Pittsburgh Steelers 28-0 after the first quarter. That's never happened in the history of the NFL in the postseason. Have a team leading 28-0 after the first quarter, and it was the Browns doing it over the team that's bullied them for decades, forever. The Cleveland Browns get off to the hottest start imaginable, and after that, Pittsburgh tried their hardest to come back in this game. Big Ben ended up throwing for 500 yards, 4 touchdowns, but also 4 interceptions. And wow, what a game for Cleveland. I can't imagine, as a Browns fan, the excitement, the energy that you have after this performance. What an incredible win against like I said, a team that has bullied you, a team that's been the big brother for years, and just to dominate the way they did. And there was times where it seemed like Cleveland might blow this lead, but they managed to keep it under control. Baker Mayfield finishes 21 for 34, 236 yards, 3 touchdowns. Jarvis Landry had a huge game, 92 yards and a touchdown. And then Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt combined for over 200 total yards and 3 touchdowns. And just what an incredible game by this defense, making Ben, not very many times does a quarterback throw for 500 yards and you can say the defense played well. But just the start that they got off to, and you could tell this team was motivated. This team was angry. Juju gave them bulletin board material, and they did it even without their head coach. Their head coach not coaching because of COVID. They didn't have Kevin Stefanski at home. Which funny story? Kevin Stefanski is watching the game by himself in a room in his basement. And he could hear that something good was happening on the first play of the game because his kids were cheering because his stream was behind theirs. That's hilarious that an NFL coach has to watch a football game like that. And because he was diagnosed with COVID, also Joel Bitonio wasn't in this game. Denzel Ward wasn't in this game. And just to win a game like this, like the way they did, is incredible. And it makes me so happy for the Cleveland Browns. The ultimate underdog. I'm always rooting for the Browns. Joel and I have talked about multiple times how this is the crush team. This is the team that we love to root for because we love underdogs. We love to root for them, and to get off to such a hot start, and all of a sudden Pittsburgh is inching their way back in. It seems like they might come in and completely devastate them. And then Nick Chubb on a 40-yard catch and run puts a dagger finally into the Pittsburgh Steelers. What a win. Regardless of how much further this Cleveland Brown team goes this week, what a win. And what an incredible time. The first win in the playoffs since 1994. That's before I was born, ladies and gentlemen. Congratulations to Cleveland Brown. And for Pittsburgh, there's a lot of changes happening for this team in the future. Who knows? We talked about this is Marquise Pouncey's final game. Is this Big Ben's final game? What are they doing at the quarterback position? And Mike Tomlin's got to find a way to keep his guys under control because this, with the TikTok dances, and can you believe this team was 11-0 and they completely fell apart, losing I think 5 of their last 6 games. An incredible come apart by the Pittsburgh Steelers. They have a long offseason. Steelers fans don't have a whole lot to look forward to this offseason. But that wraps up every single game from Wildcard weekend. And then we look ahead to next week. And we're going to get into the divisional round picks as we get into the next round of the playoffs. And now the number 1 seeds are playing this week. And we start things off. And I also have Joel's picks here. For those of you that are curious, last week I did beat Joel in picks. He was getting pretty cocky there for a little bit when it looked like the Titans were going to beat the Ravens, rather. And then he was saying stuff like, oh, we're going to have to name the podcast the Above Average Joel Show, stuff like that. And that's kind of why he's not on this week's episode. I'm kidding. But we do have the picks for this week. First up, and this is in the order in which these games will be played. We have the Los Angeles Rams coming off a huge victory over the Seattle Seahawks. We're still not sure who the starting quarterback is going to be for the Rams. But they play the number 1 seeded Green Bay Packers at 4:35 on Saturday. And the biggest keys to this game, like I talked about with the Rams, can they establish the run? And can their defense play as well as they did against Russell Wilson? I was just about to say Russell Westbrook. Russell Wilson last week. And if they can do that, they have a chance. But I'm going to pick Green Bay because I think Green Bay is just too much. I think their offense is a different level. They have a way better offensive line than Seattle. I think they have better skill position players. And I think they have a better quarterback, quite frankly. And I think this game will be close. I don't think it will be a blowout. But in the end, I think Green Bay comes out on top. And Joel agrees with me. He's also picking the Packers to win in the divisional round. And then we move on to the Baltimore Ravens going into Buffalo. Buffalo still high off of their first playoff win in 25 years. This is the 8:15 game on Saturday. And there's a lot. This game is going to be fun. I mean, it's going to be a really, really entertaining game between two lethal, deadly teams. I mean, these teams, I think, are equally as scary right now. And to me, the keys for Baltimore in this game, Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Peters, they need to come to play in this game because those are two former All-Pros. Last year, they were both All-Pros on the same team. And if those two corners can come together and play their best game against Josh Allen, and that's easier said than done because Josh Allen is incredible. Stephon Diggs is incredible. But if they can somewhat shut down that passing offense and Baltimore can get off to an early lead and continue to dominate on the ground with that run game. And like we talked about, Bills, one of their biggest weaknesses is that run defense that they have. So if the Ravens can take advantage of that, contain big plays from Buffalo, that's the keys to victory. If Buffalo, however, gets off to an early lead, and this is the key to Buffalo, I think you got to score quick, and you got to make Lamar Jackson throw the ball. Lamar Jackson played incredible last week in the wildcard round, but I still don't think he's playing that well as a passer. He had an ugly interception in last week's game. And that was when they were playing from behind. So I think if you can get the Baltimore Ravens in a spot where they're down a couple scores, and I know they came back from 10 points, but against this Buffalo team, it's a different story. And if Buffalo gets off to an early lead, I just don't see it happening for Baltimore. However, that being said, I'm going to pick Baltimore in this game. I think they're surging at the right time. And I'm kind of picking with my heart as a Dolphins fan. I don't wish too much success on the Buffalo Bills, but also I think the combination of a good enough defense and a run game, like I said, if Baltimore can win the coin toss, go down and score, immediately get a lead, and just get a couple stops on Josh Allen and run the clock out with that run game against a run defense that has struggled at times this season. That's a recipe for success for Baltimore. That's why I'm picking Baltimore to upset the Buffalo Bills. Joel's going to go with his Bills. Obviously, he just loves the Buffalo Bills, so he's going to go with them. And then on to the Cleveland Browns versus the Kansas City Chiefs. This is the first game on Saturday at 3:05 p.m. And the Browns Cinderella story, will it continue this week as they get Kevin Stefanski back, Denzel Ward's back, Joel Bitonio's back? I think in the end, though, Kansas City, I feel like they're going to hit another gear, and they're going to be too much. As much as I love the Browns, and I hope this game is fun and competitive, and we've seen what happens in college when Baker Mayfield plays Pat Mahomes. Crazy things can happen, but I think in the end, the Kansas City Chiefs are the best team, I think, remaining, and they're still the team that I picked to win the Super Bowl from the very beginning of the season, and I think they beat the Cleveland Browns here. And then on to the final game, the late game on Saturday, and it's Tom Brady versus Drew Brees, and what is probably most likely the final time these two quarterbacks will face off against each other. It's the Buccaneers versus the New Orleans Saints, and man, I really hope we have a complete shootout. I hope that Brees and Brady are both playing at their highest possible level, and we see these two guys duel it out. Because man, oh man, would that be fun. And I think these teams are very similar. I think they're kind of peaking at the right time. They're getting contributions from all of their skill position players at the right time. With the Buccaneers, we have Antonio Brown, pitching in, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. And then with the Saints, Kamara's a part of the offense. Michael Thomas is back. And Drew Brees is playing as well as we've seen him this season. And I think this is going to be a fun game. I hope it's going to be a fun game. And despite the Tampa Bay Buccaneers not being able to finish off the Saints once this regular season, I'm going to say they finally do it. Third time's a charm. I'm going to say the Tampa Bay Buccaneers knock off and end the career of Drew Brees. And Joel is also taking the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, surprisingly, and he is also picking the Chiefs. I forgot to say that. But that pretty much wraps this episode up, Joe. A wild card of an episode, I think pretty loaded episode. A lot of things going on in the background of this podcast. I had to stop a couple times because there were, some screaming going on from neighbors, all that good stuff, Joe. But I had a good time. I don't know about you.
I had a great time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And just, sorry, what were you saying?
I was just saying thank you.
Okay, all right.
Thanks.
And thank you guys for listening. The world can often nowadays seem like it's crumbling around you.
Especially right now. Sorry, I don't want to get into it. Should I get into it?
What, that we're in a state of emergency?
Yeah, our province is now in a state of emergency.
Yeah. So
State of urgency for some action, okay?
Yeah, I'm urgent time for some action right now.
Yeah. We're in a state of emergency, so for the next 28 days we cannot leave our houses, so that's good.
Yeah, so we'll see if that affects the podcast or whatever. But for those of you that do listen to this podcast every week, if this can be your normalcy, your consistency through this wild time, with the world crumbling around, the one consistent thing is the Average Joe Football Show. We will be here for you week in and week out. And that being said, we are taking a 4-week hiatus starting. I'm just kidding.
Starting effective immediately.
No, I'm just kidding. We will be back next week, wrapping up all the divisional games, moving on to the championship games before we get to the Super Bowl. A lot of fun times ahead. The playoffs are just getting good, I think, now. But Joe, I don't know if you have anything else you want to say before we wrap up the podcast. Nothing at all. You don't want
to. Except for that, it's really loud when you constantly move your hat up.
Oh,
and down.
Can you hear it? Because I've been doing it a lot.
I know.
Why didn't you say anything?
I just realized it now.
Oh, no.
I didn't realize what you were doing, but it's going to sound fine.
Okay. Yeah, Joe is the illustrious producer after all. Make sure you follow us on social media at _Average Joe Show on Twitter and Instagram. Give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. Give us a good review. Subscribe, please. Please subscribe. And continue to tune back every week for new episodes. But that pretty much does it, I think. Another good one in the books. We will catch you guys on the next one.